Welcome back. Yet another report has now exposed China. US-based scientist Andrew Huff, who worked at a controversial research lab in China's Wuhan, has said that Covid-19 was a man-made virus that leaked from the facility. Covid was leaked from Wuhan Institute of Virology, a state-run and funded research facility, 2 years ago, as per this report. In Huff's latest book, The Truth About Wuhan, he claims that the pandemic was caused by the US government's funding of coronavirus in China. Huff also claims in his book that China's gain-of-function experiments were conducted with inadequate security, resulting in a leak at the Wuhan lab. Foreign laboratories did not have the adequate control measures in place for ensuring proper biosafety, biosecurity and risk management, ultimately resulting in the lab leak at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Andrew Huff reportedly said in this book, for more than a decade, the organization has been studying several coronaviruses in bats with funding from the National Institutes of Health and has forged close ties to the Wuhan lab. The NIH is the primary agency of the United States government responsible for biomedical and public health research, the report also added. Mr. Huff stated that the non-profit assisted the Wuhan lab for many years in developing the best existing methods to engineer bat coronaviruses to attack other species. China knew from day one that this was a genetically engineered agent. The US government is to blame for the transfer of dangerous biotechnology to the Chinese. I was terrified by what I saw. Well, the cat's out of the bag, but the big question is, has the cat been out of the bag for quite some time and it's just received some corroboration? We'll talk about this with our guests. Joining me on the show is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat, Dr. PSV Rao, consultant surgeon, Manipal Hospital, Bengaluru, Dr. Vivek Gupta, head of department, cardiology, Apollo Hospital, also joins us on the show. Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, editor of Hard News, foreign affairs expert, is also with us on the program. Ambassador Goel, if I can start with you. Well, sir, this is something that we have already known, that this did start in Wuhan. This is something that the Chinese knew of, and this is something which was funded by the Americans as well. But the big question is, what can be done now?
That's $1 million question. What can be done now? And I think there was an attempt made around a year and a half ago, after the discovery of this virus causing COVID-19. There was a team of scientists or the virologists who had gone and visited the Wuhan laboratory. They had submitted a rather damning report on the basis of which further investigations were to be conducted to fix responsibility on those who were responsible for this virus. Even at that time, as you mentioned yourself, was a clear conclusion that the way this virus is structured, the splicing of a foreign gene between the two clearly indicated that this was a man-made virus, and therefore it must have been made somewhere. It's an artificial virus. It was clearly established there. There were several articles, and after that there was WHO at the annual meeting had undertaken to carry out further investigation on the basis of the report. There were scientists who had gone there again to the laboratory after a lot of from the Chinese side, who actually didn't allow them to come in for quite some time until such time as they had sufficient opportunity to clean up the virus of any kind of evidence. And only then they were allowed to come in. Obviously, they didn't find anything at all. And after that, the WHO head, he said that he will continue a further investigation. It has been 1.5 years. Nothing has come out of it. It's simply because powerful countries, geopolitically, strategically powerful countries are involved in this. And I don't think anybody wants to fix responsibility in this case. And I'm not just saying China, the US is involved. When the people from the USA knew what is happening there, that there is a lack of security, even if it is not deliberately engineered. It's a bioweapon program, and you're conducting a bioweapon program in a laboratory in China, knowing fully well how Chinese have been able to steal secrets of any kind of a program, and that it could be used by them for their own designs. Despite that, it didn't stop. And the result, how many million people have died so far from the COVID? And still the threat is not over. Therefore, I think only thing that can be done now is to put in place protocols and systems that this kind of a situation never gets repeated, threatening the whole humanity the way COVID did.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good points there. Dr. Rao? Dr. Rao, if you can hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Well,
can you hear me? Good
yeah,
evening.
gain of function research happening in China for a very long time. They did
Yes.
not take the proper precautions. They continued to have flights to and from everywhere in the world. They infected Europe first and then the subcontinent and then, of course, other parts of the world as well. If this author is to be believed, that China was in the know all throughout, and it is still battling the COVID virus as we talk about this issue today. What is there to learn for China through these experiments which they have been conducting illegally and are funded illegally?
What is there for the rest of us to learn from this? More than what China knows what it has done. And do you ever expect someone who has done something like this, for which the liabilities are unimaginable, to actually admit that yes, we did it? You won't. No criminal will do that. And just imagine if China was to admit that yes, it was a leak from our lab. What are the international liabilities for it? So don't expect them to ever do it. And I've said this before. And in my series of articles in the Sunday Guardian, right from more than 1.5 years now, I have shown all the scientific evidence which showed, one, that this was a lab manufactured virus because of the insertion of the furin cleavage site to make it specific for the human site. Second, that this gain of function research was going on in the name of being ready for a future virus in advance, but actually being done with the hope of having a vaccine ready in advance so that a lot of money could be made out of the human misery that would follow the virus escaping. And who was behind it? It was actually the American defense and the American vaccine producing companies and the health Fauci and his group, because they could see huge profits from this whole thing. And when it became difficult for them to continue this research in US because of some lab leaks and because of they openly published the details of how they had come out with the chimera viruses which they had developed, they happily outsourced it to China. And in Wuhan, they had safety level 2 lab. They didn't have a safety 4 lab. So what the US did was to force France to help them set up a lab, safety lab 4. Now, once the French did set up that part of the lab in Wuhan, the French were kicked out. And after that, it was a pure American-Chinese game going on there. And when the incident occurred, there were enough evidence that they were still continuing to work in the level 2 lab rather than in the safety 4 lab. And even in a safety 4 lab, there have been enough incidents around the world where viruses have managed to escape. So these incidents, there are enough such incidents. So point-wise, one, you have definite scientific proof that this was a lab-created virus. Second, there are now enough scientific evidence that which all published evidence in international literature, which I've all put out in my articles, that these people, the Americans had outsourced it to a certain group of Americans. It's not the whole of USA. It is a few money-minded Americans who had outsourced it.
Let me also rope in Sanjay Kapoor into this conversation as well. Sanjay Kapoor, people have been blaming China for this, as they rightfully should. But now the Americans are also being named by this particular author in this book. But nobody's really talking about that. Nobody's actually, pointing fingers at the Americans the way they have been at the Chinese.
You're very right. Actually, it would be unjust to the Chinese to be blamed entirely for this, primarily because the gain of function as came from the US, and primarily because they didn't want to do this kind of dangerous, experiments in their own country. They wanted to shift to some other country, give them some money, and they allowed it. But we have forgotten about how or what all really happened. If you remember, we used to have many programs and discuss about it, and that time we used to talk about how the United States of America has a lot to answer for. In fact, if you have been following the progress of the Lancet Commission headed by Jeffrey Sachs, you would come to some conclusion about where it went wrong, primarily because Jeffrey Sachs builds on the Intelligence Committee report, which was set up by Joe Biden, which never conclusively said that it was, it was of natural origin. It was, it required further investigation, because the fact of the matter is that it was a laboratory origin, and Jeffrey Sachs, in number of conversations subsequently, has talked about it. In fact, it worries me that even India, long back in the IIT Delhi, for instance, investigated and found some inserts coming in from HIV/AIDS, and they were trashed primarily because there was a very strong lobby abroad which said that you cannot be looking into this aspect. But they were closer to truth, and they, in a certain way, if you allow the investigation to carry on, they would be able to prove conclusively that there was some human intervention that had gone into it. But this is a matter which is, I think, very, very important for humanity at large. We should be in a position to find out how it exactly started. There is a great effort at obfuscation. There's an attempt to conceal the origin of this virus, primarily because there could be possibility of establishing murder charges against those people, because not just 8 million people, as people say, have died. There are about 18 to 20 million people died, and they're still suffering. I mean, if you look at China, China is in the throes of this extreme crisis because they know the implications. They know that if the virus starts spreading in their country, more than millions will die, and their entire health system would collapse. So this is a danger which is still looming very large, and I think it's important to establish the people who are responsible for it.
Right, absolutely, Sanjay, you're completely right about that. Dr. Gupta, if you can hear me?
Yes. It's always great to be with you.
Yeah.
And,
thank you, Dr. Gupta. Your point of view on how China has been implicated in the dissemination of this virus. They have been made rather a scapegoat when it comes to COVID-19. I'm not supporting them in any way, but I'm saying there are other parties to this entire mess which has been created.
you see, we have been all suffering, and we have witnessed through your channel, other channels, that what has happened to not only to India, but to the whole world. This pandemic, which has created a major loss of life and also the loss of economy, started, I want to remind you through this channel that we started all with December 19, when actually everything was going on well, and then some virus was some case was found out in China. In February 20, then President Donald Trump came to India with all the data. In March, we all started having the WHO said it is a concern, and after that there was a lockdown from the whole 20 was not completely washed up. June 20, I think 2020, the government allowed the unlockdown, and then of course the Diwali was there. Then January it was okay. 2021 again the wave 2 came, and that killed more number. I don't recall any family which has not suffered, any family members or related family members who have not suffered the loss of life. So coming on to the point, whether America to be blamed, then we have a lot of course, vaccination started with the Honorable Trump, Covishield, then Covaxin, then Sputnik. So we have all suffered. Just wanted to recall everything because I was reading the newspaper recently that again the Beijing has started the lockdown and they are still suffering. Whether America to be blamed or China to be blamed, but this is actually great, I would say, such research, whether it is happening in USA or in the Institute of Virology in Wuhan, which whether it was used for the biowar or they say that they wanted to find a method where they bat coronavirus, they have a system where it should not come back to us, and they wanted to go a preventive strategy. We don't know whether they wanted to produce a virus for biowarfare or it was actually something in a positive direction. First of all, the most important thing is why it leaked out. That means they did not have enough system where they could have prevented the leaking of the virus, where one person, and then of course it was so contagious and was so much infectious that people were killing. Of course, we were dying first in China, later to America, then Europe, to India, so everything. My concern is, can we stop such things to happen or not? Because WHO as a main authority, United Nations another authority, then we have so many summits, international organizations. Today it was coronavirus, tomorrow it can be another virus. Whether they are doing still experimentation or not, we have to some watchdog, because human life is very precious. We have to think of positivity. Already we are suffering because of the climate problems. We don't want another virus to start off. So who is going to actually monitor this? If the big people like America, I mean the people, big economy, they are themselves involved in producing such viruses or to produce something which is good for them economically. If they don't think of humankind or mankind or humanity, then we have to be really, really serious. Something else to happen. Our Prime Minister or somebody else has to take very important. Whether Mr. Andrew Huff has completely right or not, this requires a big investigation. And I think WHO should rope in. They should not be guided only by one country, and they should start working like somebody who's working only for one country or two countries. We have to be very, very serious on this issue. Being a cardiologist, I have seen many deaths happening in my own Apollo hospital. The whole world has seen so many people have died. What to do? Because we cannot have another misery in the coming next 5 years. Our children are there. So we have to find something. So I don't know. The answer is, who has the answer? When America is himself involved in such so-called positive research, is actually a negative research. My father has been working with ICMR. He's always done the positive research. If these are so-called positive research comes out to be negative research, the virus comes out, leaked out, and so many people dying, I think we have to be very, very serious about this issue. Some other body has to come out, which should be made by United Nations. We should be actually keeping watch on all such research labs, what's going on. We know that it is difficult to actually, when the United States was trying to watch out in this Wuhan lab, they were not allowed initially, and then it was allowed, and there was some reports which was not coming positive or negative. So I don't know what the reason, but I am very much scared that any such calamity can again happen, because the things are not completely in the right direction. Whether such debates, of course, are very important. If you can, whatever has transpired through this debate, if it can be sent to the White House or to the China, that these are serious matters, what Suresh Goyal Sahab has said, Dr. Venkatesh has said, myself or yourself or Sanjay Kapoor, such things should also go in writing as a mail, that this is a serious concern and we have to be very, very cautious for the future. Again, we don't know that another Omicron or other than something like Omicron is still causing havoc there, whether we are, all of us are not completely immune. We may say that we have innate immunity now, we suffered, we have, by myself call it, more than 1 year, I have not used anything. Secondly, one point I want to really point out, I have seen many cardiac deaths, being a cardiologist, post-vaccination. And then the research was there that spike protein actually causes thrombus formation inside the plaque and also leading to plaque rupture. So if that is happening, that means even the vaccine is not safe. The best thing is to provide an answer. Best thing is to prevent such research happening in the virus lab, in various virology labs. And that's the only way we can prevent it, because vaccine is
Right. We've run out of time as well. We're going to take concluding thoughts, starting with Ambassador Goyal. Ambassador Goyal, this is something which needs to be prevented. This is something that needs to be stopped. This is also something which has been taken for granted of late, because everybody feels that things are back to normal. China is still in a lockdown, but it's only a matter of time before, everything is mobile, everything is accessible, and the world is back to its pre-COVID days. But it should not be the case, considering the harrowing time that we have had in the last couple of years. What do you recommend? What do you suggest should responsible countries do? Especially with countries like China and the United States, who have been a part of this problem.
Thank you, Vineet. I have a thought. It's rather a radical thought, and I know that it's an idea that probably will not be acceptable to most of the countries, the developed countries, because they themselves would be at the receiving end, and the developing countries, particularly countries like India, because we are giving more power to one United Nations organ. than the others. I remember in 1994 when I was in UN and the debate was going on in the UNGA and the other organs of the UN. There was a severe humanitarian crisis in African countries like Rwanda and Somalia, where because of the inner conflicts, inner war going on there, civic strife, the affected population was not even able to receive humanitarian assistance. And at that time, despite all the opposition and despite all the views against it, United Nations was able to adopt a resolution that Security Council should be able to authorize an operation. Call it peacekeeping operation, it was called humanitarian assistance supporting operations. To use Chapter 7 provisions if necessary, that they would establish operations to ensure supplies of humanitarian assistance to the affected population. And that did have a salutary effect in terms of other agencies of the United Nations being able to deliver on this. I think any action by any country which leads to such kind of catastrophe affecting innocent population should be able to attract the provisions of Chapter 7 of United Nations, where they could face sanctions, they could face punishments, penalties for undertaking any such action. I know it's a radical thought. It may not even be applicable because if the culprits or the guilty parties are countries like USA and China with veto, they would obviously not allow Security Council to establish such an operation. But I do think that these kind of actions should invite Security Council intervention.
Okay, good point, sir. It's a radical thought, but definitely, unless we go for radical, we'll have to deal with default radical situations such as COVID-19. Dr. Rao, your concluding thoughts? 10 seconds to each one of you, sir. We have run out of time.
First of all, we have to extend the chemical warfare and bio warfare convention to cover unethical virus studies like the gain of function studies. We have to do that first on the international level. Secondly, there have been many other virus outbreaks, natural virus outbreaks, which have been contained, not with vaccines, but by right in the beginning, working towards notifying everyone, quarantining, and by stopping the spread of the virus. This is another thing on which we have to tell China that it was very irresponsible of them to allow this virus to spread to the whole world and to suppress the fact that there was a new virus which was highly infectious and capable of human-to-human spread. They also went to the extent of trying to influence the WHO into denying the human-to-human spread. So this kind of allowed this virus to spread, whereas many other viruses have been contained like that. And thirdly, when vaccine is developed, we have to have international conventions which allows not profiteering from vaccines, but helping everyone else. Because if everyone is vaccinated, then only the virus spread stops. If you hoard vaccines in your developed nations and even let it expire and not give vaccines to the poorer nations, eventually the virus will spread from the poorer nations again back to you in a new form. So all these three measures have to be taken. Thank you.
Hello.
Sanjay Kapoor? Sanjay, concluding thoughts, please.
Yeah, I will just. I agree with what Ambassador Goyal has recommended and also the Roxab. But I would also like to say something more, which is to ascertain exactly the origin of this virus, which has been actually obfuscated very methodically by the powers that are responsible. You look at the way it has been, every time there is some report which suggests that it was, leaked from the laboratory, then there would be a contrary report which will come that no, it has a natural origin. So there is a very powerful lobby that wants to show it's a natural origin. So that has to be actually in a certain way ascertained properly. So first, before any action should be taken against any country, it's important that we find out how it all began. And that is where the salvation for the population of the world would really lie.
All right, Dr. Gupta.
Sir, as a doctor, I would say that the things are not gone still. First of all, in our country, especially most of the countries, we have completely thought that now vaccine is finished and there's no need for it and that will not come back. The vaccine does not work beyond 9 months. We have seen the Covishield, although I was myself skeptical with the spike protein vaccine that they can cause rupture of the plaque, but in most of the majority population, it is safer as concluded by many studies. So I would say that we still should have a program that at least once a year, such vaccination should continue, which is now not being thought even by ICMR or WHO. This is my small recommendation. Secondly, the more important thing is that our country, although it's a developing country, still is affordable. We should have something coming up from Indian Council of Medical Research or from the Government Department of Ministry of Health Affairs that some immunity boosters should be always be given a recommendation by advertisements or by distribution from the various primary health centers, secondary health centers, so that most of the people who are more vulnerable, like more than 60 years age, diabetic population, heart patients, cancer patients, they should have better immunity to face any such calamity if at all it happens. Otherwise, also this will help them in general to be more. And there are various kinds of immunity boosters available. First of all, of course, a complete vitamin, and also CoQ enzyme,
Right,
and ashwagandha. Ashwagandha should be given prime importance. I would like to just take 1 more second. It is also a tumor preventing property. My father, Dr. Emil Gupta, did research in 1986, and it is a big immunity booster. So if these can be combined in a general population, at least future calamities can be better faced by us if at all it happens.
Absolutely. Great points there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Would have loved to discuss how India at least can insulate itself from, this tragedy, which in fact took place in every household, almost in every household throughout the country and perhaps even throughout the world because of a couple of irresponsible decisions by a couple of irresponsible nations as well.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.